Today, I want to talk to you about relationship health. When your body is unwell, it speaks to you. Your body speaks to you through fatigue. It speaks to you through lumps and rash and aches and pain and things that make you realize that it is unwell and you need to take yourself to the doctors, or you need to seek your home remedies or whatever it is that you do to recover from such ill health. And when your car is unwell, it speaks to you. It speaks to you through the dashboard, which tells you that your oil or your brakes or your engine has a problem. It speaks to you through the speed and the exhaust and the brakes and your own feel of how it used to work and how you can now see it shifting and drifting and struggling. And relationships need the same amount of health evaluation and health assessment to ensure that they work well. Because life leaves its dents on those relationships. And some of them are just minute bumps and scratches, but others are crashes that are quite significant and tragic and in need of addressing. Now, in psychotherapy, the term for this relationship health that I want to talk to you about is rupture and repair. And what that means is that as you go along life in your relationships, whether as a parent, as a sibling, as an employer, or any other citizen of the world, your relationships encounter bumps, they encounter scratches, they encounter crashes that create ruptures in their normal functioning. Ruptures that need to be repaired. And today we are going to talk about what a rupture means and the impact that it has on you, and what strategies you can use for repairing and the outcomes that you get when you're doing proper repairing to your ruptures. The one thing that is inevitable is those ruptures, because as human beings, we are different. And sadly, we go into relationships with expectations of equality, expectations of what you want even before you live with that person. And sometimes the expectations themselves are the cause for the ruptures when reality sinks. My name is Asa, and I welcome you warmly to this corner where we raise an awareness and we have simple discussions that create this forum for us to learn and grow together. I welcome and appreciate my returning subscribers. And if you're new here, please join us and participate with us weekly in these conversations. So what is a rupture? A rupture is anything that causes hurt, that causes misunderstanding, disconnect in a relationship. And it can be as tiny as a misunderstanding, something that you expected to be done and wasn't done because the other person did not know that expectation. And that often comes from the lack of clear communication between parties in that relationship. And so based on your expectation that someone was going to take out the trash, or someone was going to pick up the kids or do the shopping, them failing to do that task manifests as non-willingness, their inability to meet your need, their inability to pull their weight in that relationship, especially in cases where that was not clearly communicated as your intention. And in other cases, it's communicated as an expectation. And because they didn't see themselves doing that or doing that in that moment, it is not done, and it becomes a topic of contention of you should have done this, but who made that rule? And that's where the little dent starts to break the rift open and bigger. And the sooner it is repaired, the sooner It is glued. Because some of those little dents then go wider and wider, and everyone making their point and everyone taking their time, and eventually the rift goes wider and wider and builds a bigger rupture than intended or initially existed. The other thing that creates those ruptures is the ego, what shows up to protect us, to cover our insecurities, to cover our hurt and our past and our triggers. And in relationships, like I mentioned, everybody is different, but everybody has expectations and in some cases entitlements to those expectations. And so when you're challenged, your ego shows up instead of listening to that criticism, listening to that supporting advice. And in other cases, it is the way the advice or criticism is delivered that puts your walls up. And therefore, some well-intended information that was meant from the one party to advise and encourage and improve the relationship ends up being perceived as an insult or a criticism because the ego shows up, because the expectation is standing in the way. So what are some of the strategies that you can use for repairing? You have clear communication. You have being open and honest with yourself and with others. And you have being empathetic and lowering your expectations. When you go into relationships with certain expectations of that lover or that parent or that colleague, it is more often the expectations that lead you down and not the other people. When you expect this thing to pay you that much, when you expect this relationship to feel this way and it doesn't go that way, it is not often because the other person has failed to meet your needs. It's because you expected them to do it, and that's not generally what they are. And so you need to manage your own expectations and communicate them clearly in a way that is non-confrontational. Because sometimes we challenge for the right reason. You want somebody to grow. You want a behavior to change. But when you deliver that information in a critical and confrontational manner, their walls come up. And that information and the value of that communication is lost in translation because of the approach with which it is delivered. And on the other side of things, the person who is offended by that delivery has to get over themselves. Yes, be able to express the fact that you do not like the delivery, but be able to take the advice out of that situation. Because at the end of the day, it is valuable to be challenged and to grow from those situations. And finally, when you're honest with yourself, it means that you're self-aware. It means that you're self-accepting of your own weaknesses. You're self-accepting that you're not perfect, that you make mistakes, that you need to learn and grow. And so when you get over the initial upset of how did they speak to me, you will still be able to listen to that message that was communicated wrongly. And therefore, you're able to express yourself. You're able to put your boundaries clearly and say, I hated this aspect, but I'm going to take this aspect out of it, and be able to differentiate and clarify and communicate clearly that this is who you are, this is what you need, without expecting, without feeling that sense of entitlement that that expectation has to be met by the other person. Our relationships need just as much healing as our bodies. Because if you think about it, our bodies are part of that relationship. Our relationships contribute to our own internal, emotional, and mental health. And that healing has to start from inside out. And it also has to come from those that you're in relationships with. So ultimately, you have to heal your relationships to some extent to also contribute to your own individual, personal, and emotional health. I hope you've enjoyed this and that you can share to motivate and empower other people that you're in relationships with.